Hey everybody, mkwann here. Gregorian calendar date, February 26th, calendar year 2024. And as you can see, I am deep in an underground bunker where the simulation is being managed. I'm just being silly. This is just a background shot. All right. So much has happened since the last time I made one of these videos a week ago. And I talked a little bit about, in that last video, saying, like, I don't know what I'm going to do with the remainder of mine and Christie's interview on the origins of Susquehanna Alchemy and where it's going. And truth be told, a lot of the steam and energy to go and put it somewhere else is just kind of dissipated. So I'm going to put the remaining 2 hours of that conversation we had, that's what this is. That's what's following this little introduction. For those of you who found the conversation cringeworthy, well, then here's 2 hours of cringeworthy conversation for you. But there's some real gold in it, in my opinion, particularly for those of you that have come along on this journey so far of Susquehanna Alchemy. The first hour continues down the that path of where it began and kind of the twists and turns Susquehanna Alchemy and myself went. And the final hour, and that's really the what I would say is the most important part of the video, is where we go into great detail on what this River and Stars ceremony and arrow circulation tour is going to be. So if you watch anything, that's what I would highly recommend. And we're going to continue to talk about that for, just watch the video and you understand why. Secondly, what I want to point out is in the last couple days, so we're no longer in the Harrisburg area. We're back to the River House, and we're going to be there for a couple days before going to Philadelphia. So the first 10 or 11 days in March, we'll be in Philadelphia. I'm going to be meeting up with Ross Ben. I'll record with him. I'm going to meet up with Allison McDowell. I don't think she and I are going to record, but I am anticipating both of those meetings and seeing what comes out of that. And also, this is what's interesting. Since I've been in the River House, in the lower Susquehanna, it's definitely a very different vibe than the places we've been staying. It's very much like I use this word accurately, but not in like the common sense, I suppose, but it's a dropout culture. It's a counterculture location, and there's a decent library there, and I picked up a book. The book is called Gone Croatan. Perhaps some of you are familiar with it. It was new to me. And its subtitle is Origins of North American Dropout Culture. And the book, well, first, the title, Croatan, is it's making reference to the lost colony of Roanoke. And then there's a lot of written in this book. It's a series of essays. I think it came out in the 90s, which coalesces, whatever the past tense of that word would be, very, very tightly with Susquehanna Alchemy and the stuff which how life has been unfolding for me, and where this River and Stars ceremony is kind of going. And so I want to create a video talking about that, and then specifically about a very bizarre revelation that I discovered in the last place, which we stayed in the Harrisburg area. So all that is coming. Also, I believe Christi created a video, just her, and she wanted to talk a little bit more, I guess, about whatever was, the to-do from video number 1 of mine and hers interview. So that is coming as well. So anyway, I hope you all are well, and keep your eyes peeled for more stuff to come.
Project like that.
Yeah.
To get all that stuff out. Okay, so all right, so this is like digital art and also like craft, like high craft art. But then there's this type of art, which I don't know if most people know, but I mean, you did collage work, and that and you've recently had that collage work up on the mediums. But you're also a drawer. Like, I mean, these are kind of simple drawings. Not really, maybe, but like I've seen you just grab a note, like a piece of paper, and start scribbling, and then all of a sudden there's like a form. It's like a really specific kind of, you know, drawing that I don't know how you do it. And I want to bring focus back to these because these are just 5 cards of a deck of maybe 30. And I keep saying I have the PDF ready. Like I have the full PDF of all of these cards, and I'd love for us to go through and have you teach from these, because I mean this neural networking between the physical brain and the field, like that you were doing that in 2015.
Yeah.
Did that come from some of your energy, like because you had been in some energy schools?
It was um so you I think better than anyone, the the complex psychology that that is within me, and my strict adherence against authority.
Mm-hmm.
I say that I'm like, maybe that's why I dropped out of the system, because of really my problem with authority. But what we see right here, I like, it would be an insult for me to go and just parrot someone else's stuff. Like for
Mm-hmm.
me to go and draw like something else which someone else did, like that's just, I would
Right.
never do that. So
Right.
all of this stuff is influenced certainly
Yes, that's
by
what I'm
other
at.
things, but it is a synthesis that somehow happened within me.
Right. So, but yeah, I am asking you, you had the influence of some energy medicine type training or energy, like you had some understanding of energy
Oh yeah. I mean,
from your own. Yeah.
at that, probably in the 2000s, I mean, I've had like 30 or 40 different energy books. I've took many classes. I listened to countless, like back then you would get like CDs. Like I
Mm-hmm.
I I mean, when I said like I had a PhD or a master's degree in like all of these different topics, like I definitely had a master's degree in energy, like up to
Mm-hmm.
like all of the systems through like 2012, certainly.
Yeah.
That's why I used to practice Aikido. Aikido was the embodiment of energy, of all the energy work.
Yeah. Just like on a side funny note from me, I know you're not interviewing me, but when you said you'd get the CDs, I found cassette tapes of Carolyn Miss's her first course on energy medicine that she gave, and it was on cassette tapes, and I listened to a couple of years ago now, but that was one of my energy medicine trainings. Was I needed it to be on cassette tape. Like it was important to me that I not watch it off of YouTube, and that I get like one of the oldest forms possible that was available on audio.
Yeah.
So maybe that was like one of the ones that you had on your shelf. Wow. Well, so I love these cards. I put these cards on our home altar at the farmhouse for several months. Um, because again, to me, it just shows like it's kind of like you're using like a child's medium, kind of, like it's kind of colory book, and it's like hand drawn. Um, it's innocent, it's pure, it's coming from like a true essence, a synthesis of truth and essence that was like alchemizing within you. And you were just being present to it and letting it pour through your fingertips. And okay, so me having a master's degree from an Ivy League school in like trauma psychology, social systems, etc., and then having gone on and done all this alternative energy and alternative native medicine kind of work and training, when I saw these, I was like, oh my God, this just brings it together on a whole nother level for me. Like I have all this like high intellectual information, right? Like all this brain training and all of this experience even, but something about these cards when I went through this deck, and I sequenced them. I sequenced them in a way that I was like, these cards build on each other. And it was inspiring. That's where I'm going. I'm going back to the three eyes. It was inspiring. And it also immediately brought years of information into complete integration in my being. And then I was like, oh my God, I now get Susquehanna Alchemy on a whole nother level. And I get the river and the importance of taking rites of passage on the land and on the water at a whole other level because of this information right here. And this the resolution and becoming crystalline, the the note card that has 1x, 4x, 16, 64. Do you want to say a little bit about that one?
Can you read what it says on the bottom?
Yeah.
More?
As more resolution is brought to one's self and experience, a crystalline and fractal reality emerges.
So it's funny that you brought that up. I remember making that card. I remember that was one of the last cards I made in the whole deck. And I want to say that I was very inspired by like the messages in water when I made it.
Yep.
And
this points to structured water, right? And the structured waters of our body.
there's a like none of the other cards, that card, like it comes and goes out of my consciousness, out of my awareness. Like I know what this card means. Oh, that's what this card means. It's so simple and it's so insightful. And then I'm like, what does that card mean again? And no other card. I can't think of anything else I've ever done that I've ever struggled with than I do that card. And it's like the most interesting card to me because of that. So it's
and that's
funny
the
that
one
that's
I
the
picked.
one. And that's the one you put me on the spot on. Like, well, tell me more about it. I'm like, I don't think I'm the right one to do so.
Well, it ties forward perfectly because I mean we'll show an example of, maybe not in this presentation because I don't have the picture up and I don't want to go digging through my computer while my screen is being shared live. We're going to show a picture of becoming crystalline. Like we actually in two ceremonies of Susquehanna Alchemy, kind of like people coming to ceremony, and whether it's the teaching ceremony or the full-on rivers and stars, after just two, we start to see the jar of Susquehanna River water alchemize and become crystalline and take on a structure and shape. That's not just like, random frozen water when it just goes flat and it, whatever. I mean, and to me, this card, because the rest of the cards are talking about the alchemy of the body, and specifically the subtle energy body, and how when we come to the river, now we're putting the field of the river's energy, and we're mixing it with our field, and we're shifting and changing our subtle energy body in some way or another. And so specifically this resolution and becoming crystalline, as more resolution is brought to oneself, and so therefore, like, as more adaptations are brought into the field of the self, into the subtle energy body of the being, as more land and water and ancestry and cosmic energy is kind of touched by the mind and brought into the field of that subtle energy body, you're actually changing the structure of your the water molecules in your physical body, and they're becoming more crystalline and fractalized. And now you are that change agent. And now when your field and your body comes into another's presence, Michael, like yours, which is why people often are like, there's something about your voice, there's just something about the way you string things together, and it's usually not about the like didactic scientific kind of, not scientific but historical research. It's like what you bring hits people because your molecules have been crystallized and fractaled, and now you have this meeting with reality that has emerged. And when you're in the presence of other people, you're now structuring, you're kind of passing on that structuring of their waters. Is this making sense?
Yeah.
Like, we have these physical bodies with water, but then they're also connected to these subtle energy fields, the subtle body, the subtle energy body. So yeah, so I don't know, when I saw this and I studied it for a little bit and I put it on the altar, I just realized, like, holy cow, the depth of transformation that's available in Susquehanna Alchemy is immense. And especially like the 400-year container having ended, and going down the Susquehanna mystery storyline, and the Susquehanna River being the goddess, right, of old, like our ancestors would say, like, this is the goddess and we worship her, and her indwelling is the river. That 400-year enslavement of her energy towards building this empire that exists today is kind of over. Like, it's on to a new season, whatever the next 400 years may be. And we all now, I would say, through Susquehanna Alchemy, like through this work that you've presented, we all can really take and apply our bodies to that body of water, and apply alchemy in this way that moves towards sovereignty and moves towards a reality that's not technology and fully Armanian control. So what has the story?
Can I respond to what you just said for a moment?
No, because I just have been blabbing on and on and on, and I need to shut up and move on. I'm just kidding. No, go ahead, of course.
Oh,
of course.
So about the cards, I made those cards. It was such a friggin' labor of love. Like,
I can see that.
So do you realize that they're two pieces of paper which are like glued together? That's why the backs are different colors. And like they're all white, and like the way I like made the cards and like everything about it, and I carried them around, and like when I was making them, I think I had very, very high expectations of like people engaging with them, and no one ever friggin' cared.
That's so sad to me because I love these cards so much. And this is the tip of the iceberg of them.
And so like it's when you discovered them, like, I stopped carrying them around, or like, my life started going in other places. And these cards go back to what you're pointing out about, like, the innocence, like the innocent period of, or the pure period of Susquehanna alchemy. So when you look at those cards, and when I hear what you say and how they touch you, like, I don't, it's not like quite vindication. Like, there's like the sense, a lot of my work, which I did, a lot of my artwork, when I would make something, like when I would make something, I think you've heard me speak this way. Like, I hold a I'm a tough critic. I'm a really tough critic.
Mhm.
But when I know something's good, something's good. Like, I'm like, I recognize talent, and I recognize when something I make is good. I'm like, I know that my work is really friggin' good. Some of, like, the artwork, some of the bags I would make, like, and it wasn't ever received on the same level in which I knew it was. And I just
Mm.
came to terms with that. Like, I mean, I had some degree of success with my work. But like, on a personal, like, human being, like, creative, having some degree of like ego tied into your creation, and having it being well received, like, in that arena, like, I had to become okay with the fact that I'm going to go and make the best stuff which I can, because I have to be pure to myself, and recognize that other people aren't going to see it. And I got okay with that. So when
Mm.
you talk to me this way, like, there's like this, that's what I mean, like a vindication. Like, I accepted. I wasn't ever angry. Maybe, I don't know what, I accepted the path, and I did the work for the work's sake, and not for, like, it to be successful. Um, but it feels really nice to know that to have that witness. So thank you with that. And then
Mhm.
secondly, to hear you describe, um, like the water, or the way you're talking about the influence or the impact of the Susquehanna River, or of the work of Susquehanna Alchemy. You do it in a way which I don't think I've ever felt comfortable. I could never be comfortable speaking the same way, even if I felt that way. Um,
Really? But you're speaking it here, like it's right here. I mean, it's so obvious to me in this, like the fact that you made these cards and you made the rights of the 40th parallel at the same time. Like they dovetail each other.
yeah,
They're like,
yeah, they were
if
made at
they're,
the same. You're right. These were made exactly at the same time. In my mind, it was this. It is so self-evident, the the it is so self-evident, the caliber and quality of what's being produced, that it's ridiculous for me to have to state the obvious.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, that would be what was inside, but then coupled with the fact, like, you know, I don't want to be the guy who's going to go and say, like, I'm not going to promote this.
Mm.
And so to hear you say the things I couldn't say, or I wouldn't say, is I greatly appreciate it.
Well, I'm here to say them, and I'm here to bring us back
All
to
right,
Sus
so let's
to
see. So
the heart of Susquehanna Alchemy. But first, we need to dive away. First, we need to go into the 10 years of what Sus Alch became, because this is like a hot topic between you and I, so I'll try not to let it become personal. Um, Susquehanna Alchemy became storytelling alchemy, right? Which is valuable and valid. And in over the 10 years, um, the rights of the 40th parallel, the river walks, like whatever. I mean, you can speak to this, but what ended up occupying a lot of airtime of Susquehanna Alchemy, quote, brand, if it's a brand, which it's not a brand. I would say it's a mission. What ended up occupying a lot of your time and a lot of the airspace, what it came to be this really special style of storytelling. And over the last year, 2 years, it's became even different from the previous 5 years. And so I'm curious, there's kind of two parts here to this kind of question or this prompting is, talking about story alchemy and how you feel like you've woven forward the threads of the original essence of Susquehanna Alchemy, and or even just sharing after 2014-15, like what shaped, like what took, how did Susquehanna Alchemy turn into Sus Alch, which, I mean, I'm just going to put my real purist hat on for a minute and say, like, my grandmother, she used to tell me, when I was little, when you would write Christmas cards, the one time I was with her and I wrote Xmas, and she was like, Christy, don't do that. It's blasphemy. You're taking Christ out of Christmas. And I was like, no, Grandma, but it's actually the cross. Like, I'm putting the cross into Christmas. She's like, Christy, she's like, that is the cross bastardized. You've put the cross, like the arm of it down by making an X. So I was like, oh my God, like my grandmother got to me, and I never wrote Xmas ever again. So I bring that story forward because when I see or hear Sus Alch, it makes me think of that story with my grandmother. And I'm like, how dare you take Susquehanna out of the Susquehanna and turn it into Sus, which is like a cultural reference to like what my daughter says, like, Mom, that's so sus, like that's so suspect. Like, I totally get how that happened and why you did it, and I appreciate it. But then my grandmother's voice inside my head also is like, like, there's a reverence and a holiness to language and words, and when we turn them into a different shape, we evolve and develop something else into consciousness and reality. So that's my prompting for you to just go wherever you'd like to go with that.
So, all right, particularly with how this was set up, this being the question which was just put out there by going through where Susquehanna Alchemy began.
Mm-hmm.
It's very effective. So a couple things happened. I started going on. So I started doing Susquehanna Alchemy, and I was like, hey, I'm just going to do presentations in the local area. Like, there's a lot of people around here. This is an interesting topic. And I made all of these slide presentations. And in fact, I think I had like a four series slide presentation, which I created. And my initial thought was going to be that I would travel around the area and give those presentations. And at this point, I'd also had completed the rites of the 40th parallel. And so I started doing that. And I was always surprised by, how few people would come. Like, I probably gave at that period of time maybe 100 live presentations. Like,
Wow.
a good turnout would be maybe 20 people. I think occasionally, like I'd be involved in a place where I'd do a couple hundred,
Mm-hmm.
but for the most part, like that kind of puttered out. It was hard to do. It was like, it, and at the same time, I started going on podcasts. And
Hmm. And that's when you became famous.
I mean, I don't know if famous is the right word, but um it certainly broadened my exposure. And there was a period of time where I was on I was on any podcast. I wouldn't say no. And podcasting works for me. Like the type of the way I speak, um the the quickness of my mind, the ability to like create rapport really quickly, like podcasting and me were like peas and carrots.
You hate carrots.
Well, I don't like peas either. But that's Forrest Gump. That's a Forrest Gump alliteration. Like, so it went really well. And after a period of time, like I'm just tired of talking about the Susquehanna mystery.
Hmm.
Like I kind of and
You lost
what
heart.
I lost heart, and probably what also happened was because podcasting was a medium that fit me as a person or a personality. Like it fit really well. Like I'm funny and I tell good stories and I'm really quick with my mind and I could play off other people. Like it became it became a little bit more about like the me show.
Hmm.
And the Susquehanna mystery, the mission of it, like that was more of a live and in-person transmission.
Yeah.
And so that kind of went away. Like I was like, I want to talk about something else. It's like, let me go and talk about other things. And I've always had I always had a big I had a very wide range of interests, from conspiracy. Like I knew I had like I keep on using this phrase, a PhD. I'm just like be really well versed in conspiracy. I'm really well versed in magic. I'm really well versed in energy. I'm really well versed in all of these different things, and I have an uncanny ability of pattern recognition.
Mm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
like I could really, and I was a pop culture fanatic. So I
Mm-hmm.
was able to go like and I let and the presentations, like creating presentations and stories, kind of became my art form.
Right.
Like I applied that same level of art form, like it into these stories. And then COVID happened. Like I
Mm.
would do all of these videos. I would have a video and maybe like 50 people would watch. Like even after being on lots of podcasts. But then COVID happened and a lot of the crazy stuff, either people had more time to listen to podcasts or some of my out there ideas like resonated with more people. And then suddenly like the storytelling became even more supported.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, like I recognize like, and I used to, when I first started moving into telling more storytelling, my mantra was, uh, let me see if I could even remember what it was. Like everything is a story and every story can deconstruct.
Mm.
And a lot of what I would do is like I would try not to necessarily, and like I never claimed necessarily that that the story I'm telling is a factual, accurate story, but I'm demonstrating how easily stories, like whatever stories we know, can be jumbled up and retold in a way which seems plausible.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to demonstrate that on the level of consciousness, because I wanted to like show how the stories we hold on how reality is, the stories we hold on ourselves, like they all can deconstruct.
Mm-hmm.
Like, look, I look at the deconstruction story I would go and tell, like, and that's when Sus Out came. Like, I would go and hear a story on the news, and I would just kind of like poke holes in it, and I would retell it in like just like outrageous ways, but in ways that are told in a way which don't have holes in them, or at least the way I present them, there are no obvious holes. And what I'm
Mm.
trying to do is demonstrate a truth of consciousness and a truth of stories.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so there is an art form to it, and there is a
Mm-hmm.
value to it. But to your point, as a purist of Susquehanna alchemy, there was a drift from Susquehanna alchemy.
A drift, but not a complete, what would be more extreme than a drift?
Abandonment.
Not a complete
It was
abandonment.
definitely not an abandonment, without a
Because
doubt.
because even though you took the goddess out of Susquehanna alchemy, right? Like you took the river because Susquehanna turned into sus, which
Mhm.
totally makes sense because everything you were talking about is suspect. And you were teaching people to be suspect, and you were teaching them to be even suspect of their own construction of reality, right? And I don't, the your body of work meets people in different ways, but in a way, in a way, so this is me and my lens, right? And this is like, I guess what I bring to Susquehanna alchemy is always coming back to the river and the goddess. Especially as I've been deeply embracing my Celtic pagan roots over the last couple of years. Um, that I just imagine, like, all right, I'm gonna try to paint a funny cartoon in this moment, like Sequana or just whatever goddess of the Susquehanna River. She's like under this 400-year spell, this like enslavement where she's getting the shit of like all of this industry that's been built upon her. And so she's gone deeper underground. Like she's no longer very available on the surface waters, but she's deep down under in the deep waters, like kind of down by Airville at the river house. She's in the deeps where she can be like away from the surface level of this 400-year container. Um, and then here comes along this like river surveyor man, Michael Wan, and she comes up and she kind of like drops her story in your ear, and you go out and you do your thing for a couple years. And she's like, I'm not naive, Michael. Like, I get it. She's like, it's not like some spell is broken and Disney World opens upon like Harrisburg and Sunbury and all these places. Um, and so she's like, go out and just start poking holes in all this shit. Which is like what you said, like you took the Susquehanna mystery and it became more focused on story alchemy, but it's related. Like even though it's not about the river, and even though it's not about Susquehanna or even about like the area, it's still like that, like poking the holes in paradigm, poking the holes in culture, poking the holes in the construction of reality. Um, I feel like that's something that like the spirit of the river would it would if the spirit of the river had a punk side and was just like looking for someone to help her, start whittling through to the minds of the people on the lands, it would be through the stories that you tell on Susquehanna Alchemy. Like, look at all of this like the last 400 years and even further, all of it's like very easily deflatable, right?
What do you mean?
You could poke a hole in it and like all the air would come out.
Of
All the stories, like all the stories that have constructed our culture, our
of our
society,
culture, yes, yes,
yeah,
yes.
and our paradigm, right? And the river is just kind of like, on hold. I mean, and she's totally fine. Like the river, the goddess, the spirit, whatever you want to call it. Like I don't think we need to protect it. I don't think we need to do anything. I think she's totally fine. But I mean, I just have this like eye rolling vision of if I were to animate the spirit, just kind of this eye rolling, and then having someone who gets it at that level of the alchemy of the river, also be able to go and tell stories that start to just like, that's probably what the animation of the river would like to do, just go around and start poking holes in all of it, because all of it's been built upon like the power of the land and the power of the river, and it, without honoring, like without giving due honor back to the land and the river, it's just kind of like for the sake of building up an empire and not for the sake of some type of holism of humanity's evolution and beingness. Do you see the connection I'm making here?
uh keep going with the connection. I think I know where you're going, but go on.
Well, just Susquehanna Alchemy becoming Sus Alch.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like my grandmother said. It's like it's not a bastardization. Like it's not an abandonment. It's just a gentle drift, and it's almost a drift in the way that like if the goddess is just kind of uh feeding you like information, or calling upon you to tell certain stories. It's like first you told the story that mattered the most, and then you went and told every variation of every story you possibly could to poke the holes that needed to be poked, to let out the air of a society and a culture that is just completely built on fluff. And that's the bastardization, is because it's actually built on intense power in the land and the river, but because there hasn't been a reciprocity, it's really all fluff. It's all like just made up. It's Disneyland.
So okay, so I know how I would respond to what you're saying. The one of the things which I would say, which would be a hallmark of a lot of my, like, as we're having this conversation, like I'm realizing that there are multiple styles in which I present information, and sometimes it's just like kind of like one-off storytelling for the sake of one-off storytelling. Sometimes is like more philosophical, but a hallmark is the ability to interconnect things that seemingly are not connected.
Mm-hmm.
And the other hallmark, which I think that I bring to all of this, is an optimistic or lightness to the story. It's not very nihilistic. Even though I'm saying, like, I to destroy or to bring down the paradigm, if you will, there's more of a there's an optimism. Thank you. The cough got bad. Christy brought me some cough syrup. So there's an optimism which is beneath it all, which, yes, there's poking holes in all of the stories, but it's pointing to, if you will, like a mycelium network which holds everything together. And that is what the resolution card is about. That when you look down, there's an interconnectedness, and there's a structure that continues. No matter how deep you look, you're going to still see everything is connected to part of it. So so what you're saying, like particularly when you said that it began with like the story that matters, the Susquehanna mystery, and it feels like to me, being the one who's experiencing this, is there had to have been an opportunity for me to continue on my personal journey in life.
Sure.
And there was given an opportunity for me to kind of like express my own artistic creative side the way I would like to, which has been the storytelling. But there's a container for that as well, and time will tell if what I'm going to suggest might be the container. But my thinking is, and this is just kind of like me speaking off the cuff right now, is Susquehanna Alchemy began on March the 1st, 2014, and it was the same month where my Uranus opposition went direct. And it seems to be like there's a completion date on this April 8th eclipse, as marked by what naturally unfolded for us, for what we're planning with the river and stars ceremony, like how it came about, and then the events. And maybe even going back to what we were talking about a moment ago, where I'm saying that you as an individual, Christy, you bring back the purity, and that all of this stuff with the Susquehanna Alchemy, where I have drifted away from. Like your fresh eyes, your enthusiasm, your commitment to that is bringing me back.
I'm bringing you back. Is this like an Isis Osiris story?
Doesn't Osiris get his penis cut off?
I mean, lots of things happen to Osiris,
So
but
then no.
yes.
So then no,
Yes.
it's not that story.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people appreciate there we go, appreciate the drift from Susquehanna Alchemy to Sus Alch, and the story alchemization. A lot of people appreciate it, and while I have not been one of those like 7, 8, 9, 10 year long fans, I am a fan in many other ways. And I tend to just really enjoy artifacts and the old tried and true of anything. And so it's been a natural inclination for me to seek that out in you, is like, the older levels and layers, and kind of blowing the dust off the books, so to speak. But I can appreciate the drift, and I know, I guess that's like our rub, right?
Well, you are the one who murdered Uncle Mike.
I didn't murder Uncle Mike. Michael. I mean, it's funny, every time I hear you introduce a video, like, because I know the subtleties of your voice and your energy, like, just even the beginning of this video, I was like, who is that person? Can you please take that back? I did not murder Uncle Mike.
What's like, isn't there like a term when you like take someone and you put them in the home?
Put him in the home?
Yeah, you put like an old person in the home.
Institutionalized?
Maybe institutionalized. Yeah, maybe Uncle Mike was institutionalized.
Oh my word. Okay. Okay. Um, well, oh, so is Sus Alk? Oh my God. Is Sus Alk's father is Uncle Mike?
Yeah.
And Susquehanna Alchemy's father is Michael Wan. And Susquehanna Alchemy 2.0 is mkwann.
Yeah.
This really, I think there is some type of like god goddess mythology story happening in here somewhere.
The gods always get murdered. So I don't know.
But you just said Uncle Mike was murdered. That's
All
why
right, so maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. Okay. All right.
no one was murdered.
No one
No
was
one.
murdered.
Okay, so but just speaking of archetypes and mythology, Susquehanna Alchemy's prodigal son, taking you from father to uncle, and now because we've talked about Father Michael, we've talked about Uncle Mike, or what Uncle Mike, is that right?
Uncle Mike.
Uncle Mike, Father Michael, and now uh Mikey. You were just talking to your mom today on the phone. I heard her say, "Hi, Mikey."
Yeah.
So you actually put that word into our field today, the prodigal son. And I'm curious if you could bring that back online for this discussion. And where is this ship sailing, my Phoenician son, is a funny quip on some things that we talk about, and you can go there later. But I'm curious what the prodigal son kind of like, is it about the drift? Is it about the drift to suss out Uncle Mike character, and now like the return of the prodigal son? Because the prodigal son implies like a squandering of wealth, doesn't it? Doesn't the story
I
imply?
don't know it that well. So I've never, if it does, um, that's not the connotation which I hold front and center.
Okay, what is the relationship to prodigal son that you wanted to focus on?
Mostly of the prodigal son, like what you're saying with the drift. The prodigal son leaves, and I guess you're right. Like and usually has a difficult time,
Yeah.
and then comes back,
Uh-huh.
and that does feel like that feels like the experience which I've had.
Mm-hmm.
So in parallel, like going back, like I'm thinking of that time, 2014, 2015, what I was doing, how I was living life, and then the 10 years or the 8 years since then. And in a lot of ways, they've been really rough.
Yeah.
They've been exciting,
Mm.
like in a way, like they've been like adventurous.
Mm-hmm.
Like the prodigal son went away and he had adventures and he kind of got beaten up by life, but he like had experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that element, just like generally speaking. But then there's also like on a more personal, less like trying to match up to the story, like all of the experiences which I've had feel like a slow unpacking or unraveling.
Mm.
And so if we want to start this story from that time of me being like completely in the Matrix golden boy,
Mm-hmm.
and like reaching the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily the bottom like
Bottom of the bottle.
yeah, like it's not like I had like that type of collapse.
Right, right.
Like, I mean, there are people who've like really hit bottom, but I'm just saying, like, relative to me in my life and really looking at who and how I am, what matters, like just that sort of stuff. Um,
Mm.
like it's been, it's been um it's been a humbling 8 years.
Mm.
And so like prodigal son kind of comes back. I believe the prodigal son has been humbled.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's most like you really why I use that phrase or is mostly been has mostly been like just the return element,
Yeah.
because it feels like there's a return from the drift, but the coming back with like it's like humbled.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Humbled.
So my humble Phoenician sailor man, where is the ship sailing?
You mean what's the plan? Deep roots, no fear.
Sorry, this is just my notes.
Are these your notes? Her story, rivers and stars ceremony. Her story is our story, roots of a nation.
So so there's a lot of elemental ties in here. Where is this ship sailing, my Phoenician son? Where deep are roots, there is no need to fear the wind. And so, like what is the sailor's kind of best friend and worst enemy is the wind. But you're saying like over this past 8 years, you've gone out and have been many things and many characters and um, told many stories, and now it's like you're coming back to the root. um, you've kind of gone out and like diversified and grown and uh, you know really maybe could even say you've been blown around quite a bit by the winds of life. And yeah, so I'm curious, like you've come back with quote comeback, like it's not like you're having this big comeback, but you are coming back to something. And you and I have just kind of been present to the unfolding of that something. And while the rivers and stars ceremony and the tour of that ceremony is part of it, I'm curious if there are some deeper roots that may be a reflection of the kind of pure and innocent beginnings of Susquehanna Alchemy from the gestation and birth years of that. Um, yeah, sorry, I'm a little bit all over the place here, but you're coming back with humility, with diversification, with like a following of people, not just like Susquehanna mystery presentation people, but like a whole bunch of people who whether they know the Susquehanna mystery or not, they're open, willing, and ready to poke holes in the construction of reality and the construction of things today. And that does go back to the root of the Susquehanna River. So that's my there's a lot marinating on the pan right now, which is why I feel like I'm a little all over the place. So I'm just curious, like, where do you feel like this ship is sailing, and what are the deep roots maybe that you are um something, can't quite get the question out.
Well, let me take a stab at responding,
Okay.
because I think that there's another element which needs to be added to that laundry list,
Mm-hmm.
because you're describing me and like
Oh,
how I've changed or where
sure.
I've but the world has changed as well.
Right, right.
Like the
Yes.
the like the world has been humbled.
Mm-hmm.
Like the only people who aren't humbled are walking around with the virtual reality goggles on, and they're walking down the streets and they're walking a robotic dog. Like that person probably hasn't been humbled. But the people who I think this work resonates with, like, I mean, the whole world's like, WTF? Like, what happened? Like,
Yeah.
regular folks are now asking that. And
Yeah.
so, where I'm going with this is this return to the roots of Susquehanna alchemy. Um, and the prodigal son is like, I feel like, as I described, the reason why that drift, I think part of the reason why that drift began was there wasn't, like, the timing wasn't right for people.
Yeah.
Like maybe the story was too new.
Mm-hmm.
The world was still too comfortable.
Mm.
Like it hadn't gotten crazy enough yet. Things hadn't changed fast enough. Talking about technology, um, about how it was going to change everything, like it was too soon then. But now the fact that saying that, yeah, just taking these walks on this river with an awareness and an open heart, um like maybe this is the path to a future which is different than the three options that are laid before you by the powers that be. um
Mm.
that's a whole lot more appealing to people nowadays.
Mm. And the sovereignty movement has become a thing in the last, like, when did that become a thing?
I mean, I was aware of the sovereignty movement like back in 2012.
Yeah, but it reached like a pretty loud pinnacle at some point in the last 5 years.
Well, I think we're saying like the same thing, like as the last 8 years, as life in the paradigm has become less and less bearable and is encroached into like more and more dystopian. um all of these sort of uh natural effects are popping up, such as greater interest in the sovereign movement, which used to be just for, like, I don't even know if you remember, like, know what this is, like Ruby Ridge or Waco, Texas, like all of these events from the 90s, which were like sovereign movements were thought of as like really extreme, right-wing sort of human beings, like now it's like common sense for like a large percentage of folks to want to be like that.
Right, or even to entertain
Right.
the philosophical underpinnings of what sovereign, like what sovereign even really means or looks like,
Yeah.
especially in one's day-to-day life.
Yeah.
And how that just ties back to the roots of our nation, having, you know, like at least the story we're told is that um, uh, our ancestors were coming here for freedom and liberty. And Macy's growling at me because she needs to go out. So, yeah, can you pick up on that?
On the sovereign or the movement towards that?
Well, how the Susquehanna mystery, Susquehanna alchemy, is related to sovereignty.
Hmm. Well, it would be related to sovereignty. The reason why sovereignty movements are becoming more and more appealing to people, because tyranny, if you will, is becoming more and more obvious. And when I'm saying tyranny, I'm referring mostly to like technological tyranny, like, you know, just having to go through all of the, you know, everything that's come with our modern QR coded world.
Yeah.
And so the Susquehanna Alchemy is more or less a rejection of all of that sort of movement towards like what's sometimes called a technocratic dictatorship. And
Ironic, it's also been a container for that to be created.
exactly, that's part of the poetic, that's the poetic nature of the whole thing.
Right.
Like it's the technocrat, like that's also part of this prodigal son, or like returning home, like, you
Yeah.
know, the same place where it was hatched is where we find its solution. I believe the solution was one of the words which I used in the very beginning of our conversation here.
Sorry, I lost you for a moment. Indy and Macy came in. Let me go shut the door.
Okay.
Can you fill me in on the last line?
I was just saying that Susquehanna Alchemy is part of this. It's like it's a return to. It is both a turning away from the technocratic dictatorship, but it's also a returning to
A returning to self, like a returning
yeah,
to the sovereignty of the human that created that technocratic society.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think maybe I mean, we could go a little deeper on this, but I just want to say that quote one more time: where deep are roots, there's no need to fear the wind. And yeah, we've quite set our sails high to catch some mighty wind. And there's no fear in catching that high and mighty wind when deep are our roots. And these rivers and stars ceremonies, I think, is that where we're at? Yeah. These rivers and stars ceremonies so far, and because the ceremony itself has pretty deep roots, in regards to how it came into fruition, and that's another presentation entirely. I'm just trying to like derive like these deep roots, like where are our deep roots, as we are flying the Phoenician flag high, and turning our sails towards the wind with no fear. Where is the balance? So this is this this is the so I guess we're now kind of, I want to just say we're now probably like leaving the kind of 10-year anniversary Susquehanna Alchemy and review interview of Michael and of Susquehanna Alchemy's beginnings and its evolution and growth, and just moving towards where you and I are finding some of these deep roots. These ceremonies, they are feeling very deep in regards to like connection, alchemy with other human beings, actually carrying water ceremonially as a way of life for the next 6 months. So yeah, Michael, now if you want to jump in and more, do you want to take the, Jesus, take the wheel?
All right. So I think I'm gonna divide this conversation up into 3 different videos. So this is gonna be the beginning of one of the videos, like maybe the second or third one.
So should we wrap up now?
No, it'll be fine because
Oh,
I'm totally comfortable with how this is gonna be strung together in the viewer's mind, because what we were talking about, like all of that was really leading to where we are right now, which is
the return to the deep roots of Susquehanna Alchemy.
yeah. And in this kind of like, all of the lessons, all of the experiences, both individually and collectively, like they have come together and formed in the 2024 River and Stars Tour, a cosmic geomancy ceremony dates. And in this segment, which we're going into, is we want to explain exactly what this is. This is an incredibly intentional and purposeful series of ceremonies that are each individually whole, but part of a collective overall ceremony, which is all grounded in what Susquehanna Alchemy has always been about. So maybe what we could do is go to the next slide, the big picture slide. So I'm going to try to walk through each of these different points.
You already kind of covered state of the world,
Yes,
like just at the tail end of what I guess
exactly.
we're calling part 1. So I'm going to put your face back on top of that.
That's good. So the overall, and you and I, Christy and I, began talking about arrow circulation this time last year. And what we're seeing unfolded is just natural. It's the natural progression of what we were describing. And arrow circulation was an idea that was first introduced to us through a book called A Story Waiting to Pierce You. And it told the story of a Mongolian shaman who traveled the land holding a magical device, a magical arrow. And he would stop at sacred places, and the purpose of this arrow circulation was to consecrate the land, to prepare it for a coming new destiny.
Can you pause there for a moment with on arrow circulation?
Mm-hmm.
as a theoretical framework or system that's at play in operation. Does that also apply to like, because there's the native tradition of the arrows from the four directions,
Mm-hmm.
and so following the flow of the arrow out among the four directions and circulating, just kind of like how you see latitude and longitude lines circulating on a map, like arrows going out and circulating and creating a subtle energy field around the earth. Is this all related to arrow circulation?
I would say so. And also EROS, arrow circulation.
Sure, right, like life force energy of the planet and of our individual bodies. Oh my gosh, this arrow circulation is what your deck of hand drawn note cards is about.
What do you mean?
In part one, where you know what note cards I'm talking about,
Yes.
right? Like the hand drawn, hand colored note cards. That's the science, that's the energy science behind how a human being's energy field goes about consecrating the land. Excuse me. I need that cherry bark syrup. I didn't take any before I brought it up to you. How 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 avarice, or how any person who is holding their energy and their posture moves into an environment, over the lands, whatever, into a room and circulates a new energy in the space via following their own inner arrow and holding a focus and a posture in their subtle energy body. They come into a field and they change the field that they come into because they're the arrow circulator, versus people walking around willy-nilly, or even worse, people walking around with like VR goggles on, and
Mm-hmm.
they're not circulating, they're not following their arrow. They're just being consumed by whatever field is out there to consume their energy and utilize it for its own means. Anyways, sorry, that was a little bit of a rabbit trail.
So, but the arrow circulation, the concept of it is a it hits in a lot of different ways.
Sure.
And for me, what makes when we look at the river and star ceremonies that are planning, they're part of this arrow circulation. The big picture is each one of these events is the going to the sacred locations. And in a circular, I use the word circular loosely. It just means we're returning back to the space where we began, and the purpose is to prepare, to consecrate, to purify the land for a new destiny, which has always been like, it's not the language I ever used, but it was always the impetus behind Susquehanna Alchemy.
Mm.
How is it that we go and we prepare for a future which is not the three choices, the technocratic dictatorship or the Stone Age farmer? Like, what are the other options as human beings? And it
Yeah.
was like going back to the most basics of like being ingrained with the baseline reality where we have our life experiences, rivers, land, and so forth. Like the Ibarra story is very, very complementary to that in philosophy. So this is an enactment of an arrow circulation,
Practice.
practice. And you covered up the picture of what's going on in the world right now. Like there's so much tension building, and there's so much like what do we do? And everyone's got all these great sort of like solutions to these unsolvable problems. Like at least mine and your approach is like, we're going to walk the land, we're going to carry water, and we're going to go and do these consecration sort of ceremonies.
We're going to meet together in a circle at the base of what it is to be human.
Yeah.
Which has always been ancestrally on this earth, terrestrially, and according to like the stars above, has always been just that basic of like human beings living on the earth land.
So the arrow is said to be multiple different things, at least in the Abera story.
Right.
Like whether it's like a literal arrow, a magical arrow, a tent stake, a furba, a dart. But as a symbolic tool or as a power tool of the shaman, what the arrow does is it not only does it carry Aberis from place to place, when he goes into his ceremony, the arrow allows him to access the heavens and access the underworld.
Right.
The different parts of the arrow or the furba are the different layers of reality. And the purpose to doing that is that the arrow carrier leaves the confines of like the paradigm, whatever the paradigm is that the arrow carrier is participating in, and leaves it by accessing the heavens and accessing the underworld, and if you will, punctures holes through the container that holds that middle world, that paradigm, to allow in new energy. Because
wait, time out. You do see the parallel of language here, right? Between part one of the video. Who else was puncturing holes in paradigm via story alchemy?
Well, there we go.
Yours truly.
So the idea behind it is that a new destiny cannot be created from
Right.
like, it's not an evolution. It is not
Right.
the next version of the existing paradigm. It has to come from outside of it. And how do you do that? You go to the heavens and the underworld. And what do you do to access them? You have the arrow. So that is like the philosophical basis of what we're doing in a general sense, but we're also bringing in other elements. We're not just replicating an arrow circulation mission. We are incorporating all that it is that we've also been working on, which includes, well, both the water weaving and the natural astrology, which are, embodiments of the heavens and the underworld, which we talked about. So maybe
and
you
they're
talk
ancient.
about
Well, they're ancient human practices. Like people have been weaving the waters, worshiping the rivers, stewarding the waterways, keeping the rivers. Like all of this language is something that humans have been doing for a very long time, up until more recently in the last several hundred years, or at least en masse. It has not been happening. So I mean, I just I guess what is water weaving?
Yes.
Water weaving is most basically bringing water from one body to another, and weaving them. Like you give water to you take water from the creek and you take it over to the other creek, and you exchange, like you swap the water. You just like introducing the water from Creek A into the water of Creek B, and then bringing water from Creek B back over to Creek A. In our case, we're doing it with rivers, because naturally, like creeks flow into rivers, rivers flow into estuaries, estuaries flow into bays, and bays to oceans, and then there's also like evaporation and all of that. So like water has its own way of weaving itself, but then there's the human level of carrying the water across the land and weaving it in a way that water could only do by human beings, or maybe by animals like urinating. Um, so, and and then the water weaving also ties into the heavens and the underworld, as there is this water, the earth water, and the whole chamber of earth water, and then the planetary body called Earth, which is really this like the old I forget the language for this. I'm just gonna say the old belief. It's more than old, probably. Maybe you can give me the language once I say it, Michael. Is that the Earth is actually wrapped in a river, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like so everything within that is and that means the stars. Like so imagine zooming out from the Earth and zooming out to the stars, and then there's a river. And everything within that river is kind of like the earth and the firmament. And then there's another river, and beyond that river is the heavens. So it's not like the stars are the heavens. It's like that's the other world. Um, and so the water weaving also not only has to do with crisscrossing the water across the land, the water weaving also is related to weaving the waters from below with the waters above. And you can like stagger tier what is above and below from like, the underworld has its own kind of water within the land. Um, Aquifers, water that's underground, um, metaphorical kind of the river Styx and the mythologies, underworld waters, and then the waters on the earth plane being the waters above. And then you can stagger tier it saying, actually, we are the underworld, or we are the waters below, not the underworld, but we're the waters below. And then beyond the firmament is another set of waters. So there could be like multiple tiers of water going out from the center of the earth. And the water weaving is also in that it goes up and down as well as left and right, if you will, which is very much like the arrow circulation, and the arrows coming from the four directions. The waters come from the four directions, and we can anchor this with the symbology and the sigils of natural astrology and the starboard. And so I'll hand it back off to you to make that connection and description.
So I think we'll go into detail about the role of the starboard in natural astrology on another slide, but the reason why it's here in the big picture slide is it is one of the elements like which we're bringing into it. So arrow circulation as like a general philosophical practice, but then what we're specifically bringing into it is the water weaving and natural astrology, two practices which have been part of what and who we are prior to arrow circulation missions, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
the last thing I want to say on this slide was the state of mine and your world as well as part of the big picture. We haven't really lived had a permanent home since June of last year. So we're at maybe 9 months right now. And
Yeah.
last year felt like it was a a a dry run, a practice run for where we are what we're going to do this year.
Mhm.
We went cross country, we went north, we went south. We have been returned back to Pennsylvania since December. We have been living in tents. We've been house sitting. We've been doing all of these different ways to really to live, you know, purposefully, somewhat purposefully, this nomadic lifestyle, to really embody what a arrow circulator lives like. And so in every stretch of the imagination of, being able to put this ancient practice into play in this modern world, like, we're kind of doing it.
Yeah.
And
I don't have anything to say about that right now.
yeah. All right, I'm ready for the next slide.
Well, here's the general kind of zigzagging, like I guess to the right you can see some of the movement across the land, and then the big stretch going from the East Rivers to the West River to the Rio Grande. There's the big picture. All right, I don't know. All right, you
What
really
were
want
those
to touch on
steps?
all, you want to touch on all those?
Real quickly.
It's the taking the big picture and intersecting it with sorry, with the harmonic convergence Cuyahoga and yeah, the eclipse.
So we talked about the water weaving and the rivers which we're going to be working with, and they are the French Broad, the New River, the Susquehanna River, and then out west is the Rio Grande. And when we say the Susquehanna River, we mean not just the Susquehanna River, but the entire body of water which makes up the Susquehanna Riverway, which includes the Chesapeake Bay and all of the Chesapeake Bay's tributaries, because it's the same body of water. And so obviously the Susquehanna River is significant because it's part of Susquehanna alchemy. It's the basis of it. And at least in this context, as heaven and earth, the Susquehanna River, as the oldest river system on earth, is a wonderful symbol of the of the uh, um, of the underworld, like a literal river Styx, if you will. We'll be going to the French Broad and in North Carolina, and the New River in Virginia, and the French Broad, the New River, and the Susquehanna are all said to have formed roughly around the same time, about 300 million years ago. And I've always called them the sister rivers. But there's also there's the significance, because we've talked about sisters, and I'll let maybe Christy mention a little bit more about the Pleiades. But the Pleiades as a star system is another connection to the heavens, which the harmonic convergence and the coming eclipse, which takes place at the harmonic convergence, are other ways of linking in the timing of this river and stars arrow circulation ceremonies with what's happening in the heavens. And then lastly, the significance of the Rio Grande. That's the far river, which will be going to in New Mexico is where we'll be accessing that, and it plays a important role primarily because of our interaction with it last summer when we were in New Mexico, and then something a little bit more personal and synchromistic in the phonetic connection with Rio Grande and a story dealing with my grandmother and a ring and Christi, which will probably go into greater detail in a future video or part three of our video series.
Right. So the medium picture here is we've got three sister rivers, French Broad, New River, and Susquehanna. Those three sisters kind of date back and are, in fact, the grandmother rivers, maybe the Susquehanna being the oldest of the three grandmothers. And so Rio Grande is by nomenclature, is a grandmother river. But I know that the Rio Grande is actually not as old as those three. And so by name and by linguistics and play of words, the Rio Grande, and by way of the synchromistic story that we have, the Rio Grande is included in this grandmother sisterhood. And then the Pleiades, that will be in part 3, because there we go from 3 sisters to 7 sisters. And I mean, we'll go into the connection and the discovery of that in part 3. And so, Michael, do you want to go touch on the significance of the harmonic convergence in more detail here?
Yes, on with the slide you have on right now.
Yep.
So the slide that we see is the intersection of the great North American eclipses. The first one that happened in 2017, and then the second one, which is going to happen on April 8th, 2024, which that April 8th date seemingly corresponds with the 10-year anniversary of Susquehanna Alchemy. That intersection point happens to be over an ancient site, which is called Cahokia Mounds. It's just east of St. Louis. In 1987, there was a worldwide meditation at sacred sites, where Cahokia Mound was one of them. The pyramids in Giza, Machu Picchu, are some of the other places where people gathered. The reason why we find this significant is this, not only is this X gathering a lot of, this X location with the eclipses gathering a lot of excuse me, a lot of publicity right now, we have to take in consideration that this location, which is a grounding of heavenly energy, was also connected in 1987 very, very consciously by other human beings with the sole purpose of creating a peaceful world here on Earth. And so the circle, which is over, it's not really a circle, but the trail in which the river ceremonies overlaps that's not going to be the exact route we're going to drive, but if you look closely, you'll see the stars. Those are going to be the locations where each of the ceremonies are going to be. We're actually circulating around that X spot, around the harmonic convergence spot, around the location where so many human beings 40 years ago, nearly 40 years ago, sat under another significant configuration in the heavens and grounded positive intentions for a unknown future for humanity on Earth.
Woohoo. And so we're starting that arrow circulation and the ceremony, the ceremony touring on April 8th, when this energy is being reignited by another group of people who are gathering there, more, I guess, less organized than the harmonic convergence, but nonetheless, people will be gathered there for sure. And we will be gathered in Sunbury to follow the appropriate naming of significant locations on the Susquehanna River. Next slide.
Yep.
I don't know if you want to spend time on this right now, but the scaling down.
So within the every ceremony is going to have a very specific, we could just look at the pictures. Maybe we'll look at that. This is an example of a river and stars ceremony of what we bring to it. The Susquehanna River water, we see the starboard, and we see a embroidered map of the Susquehanna River. And as I discussed earlier in these videos, was the role of art in the very beginning of the founding of Susquehanna Alchemy. The role of art is also found within these ceremonies as well, through the quilt, through the starboard. And then also included is the role of song. And that's what Christi brings, as song is a big part of the ceremony as well.
I mean, you always say that song is a big part of it. I don't necessarily feel that way, but that's maybe just because song has always been such a big part of my life that it doesn't stand out to me. I would say there's a shamanic nature to the song, the use of song, or there is an attention to subtle energy and the group field. There's a significance that that energy carries, the group field energy, the song's energy, the drum's energy. Goodness gracious, we're both of our throats are done. Yeah, so I would say significance of song, of ceremony, of the group field, the circle of people that gather, like those things are all significant.
I would say art and song are some of the truest expressions of being human. And they are woven into the structure of the experience. So it isn't just, it's celestial, it's terrestrial, and it's ancestral as it relates to like us as human beings.
Well, and as it relates ancestral to art, song, river worship, all being something our ancestors participated in.
Exactly.
So the structure of a ceremony is, there's a little bit of teaching, there's a starboard constellation. You can see it there in that picture. Constellation. You can see it there in that picture. Not a constellation.
The configuration of
the mapping of the planets. Yeah. So that's a kind of like a traditional starboard ceremony is adapted and is part of the overall structure. Yes, there is like a full ceremonial opening with that I lead, and then we also are, you can see the cups and you can see the center well of Susquehanna River water, and so there is a holding and carrying and a micro circulation of water around the starboard and around Michael's Susquehanna Alchemy felt map, which is handcrafted and is the other thing on the blanket on the floor.
You can point it out with the cursor.
No, you can't. Not,
Oh,
I
you
don't
don't
have
have
a
a
cursor.
cursor on your
I,
machine. I forgot.
I only have my finger and people can't see my finger. So yeah, did I cover the structure,
I
Michael?
think
You were,
that is great. Yeah.
and so here are those dates.
So these are the dates and the locations beginning on April 8th at Sunbury. That's the eclipse day, and that's when the sun is buried. And Sunbury, Pennsylvania is where the main confluence of the Susquehanna River is, where Thomas Edison's first power plant was devised and developed. And so we begin right there. May 1st, on May Day, we'll be meeting at High Point Scenic Vista, right on the 40th parallel overlooking the river. On the summer solstice in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia. That's going to be a really good one.
So in the coming video, we're gonna go a little deeper on each one of these. Is that right?
Yes.
So be on the lookout for coming videos, because tomorrow we're actually going to Sunbury and Michael and I are going to be doing a a a walkabout in the area where we'll be holding the April 8th ceremony. And they all vary a little bit, but they are, the time commitment is is anywhere from 4 to 6 hours per, like, at each one. So, oh, sorry.
We'll go through those, or just like to list the dates and the locations. But as Christy said, we're going to be a little bit more, we're going to have another video where we're going to go more detailed at each one. But then after Berkeley Springs, which is on the Potomac, or at least one of the tributaries of the Potomac, then we'll be in Occoquan, Virginia, which also goes into the Potomac, and the Potomac goes into the Chesapeake. Then we'll be at the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay in Norfolk, Virginia. Then out to Floyd, Virginia, and at the New River. Then to Asheville, North Carolina, and the French Broad. And then in August, we'll be in Rio Grande. We'll go to Rio Grande in New Mexico. And then in September, hopefully coinciding with the autumnal equinox, we'll be returning to the Susquehanna River, and we'll be taking all of the river water, which we've been working with and weaving, and returning it back to the Susquehanna River.
Woohoo!
With a large celebration and possible fireworks.
No, there will be no fireworks.
Sparklers?
No.
Bonfire?
Sure. There can be fire. All right. Am I moving on to the next slide?
Yeah,
I don't know. Oh, look at that. I just raised my iPad and it came up.
So, okay, now we're moving into, let's actually go to the next slide, and then we'll end with Love by the Water. Because now we're, for all of you guys who have watched and stayed with us so far, I appreciate that. And we are here to talk about ways which you can become involved, ways which you can support. So, the community, Susquehanna Alchemy, if you're watching this, if you're part of this, if you're watching this, if you're familiar with the videos, if you've been to any of the past events, like, you're part of Susquehanna Alchemy, you're part of the community, and everyone is invited to come to any or all of the ceremonies. You could join us on the Telegram group. You can join one of the courses, one of the natural astrology courses, which I'm teaching nowadays. That's a way in which you can support us and this mission. Currency. Obviously, currency is the way this world works. And so for us to be able to go and move about and eat and drive, we need support from you guys. And there's a couple ways which we can do this. We've set up a GoFundMe campaign, which will help for either one time or ongoing support to cover all of the expenses. PayPal is always
Wait, back up. The GoFundMe is specifically set up with a goal, and that goal is a budget, and that is to fund the Rivers and Stars ceremony tour, which is a 6-month period. And so we took our so we kind of took a look at what we would need to be supported during that 6 months at the bare minimum. And that GoFundMe, if we can raise the funds in the GoFundMe, that will cover us as we cover all the ground to bring the Rivers and Stars ceremony tour into fruition.
And if someone wants to come to a ceremony, like how are we positioning that, or like how are we handling that? Are there tickets?
So if you are going to come to a Rivers and Stars ceremony, especially one of the ones that we've just kind of listed, all you need to do is make a donation to the GoFundMe. And the GoFundMe is the hub for the Rivers and Stars ceremony. So if you're coming, we've already had people reach out to us and we're sending them the GoFundMe. And once you have the GoFundMe, that links into the system that allows us to send you the specific details, like the link for the specific details for that ceremony. Actually, a list of all the ceremonies, and you can just pick which one. But if you're coming to a ceremony, if you want to let us know you're coming, if you want to register, whatever, if you want a ticket, go fund us and then share the GoFundMe with your friends.
And then also other ways which you can support with the currency is you could always just book a session, like any of the work which would normally people would go and order through me or Christy, like that just goes to cover our living expenses. So that's another way in which you could go and support this financially. And then lastly, the teamwork section.
So Michael didn't create this slide, I did, but I created it based off of an outline that he had on this slide prior. So you are Susquehanna Alchemy. We are Susquehanna Alchemy. This is a community. It's a movement. Currency is a part of it to keep the flow moving in the alchemy, to keep the flow moving in the evolution of what Susquehanna Alchemy can bring. And so, if you don't identify with the word community and the currency just feels like business, there's always like the brass tacks of teamwork. So, like planning a gathering with us, that's no small feat. That's not every single person, but if you're a person who has like a community or a group of people and you have a hosting space, we would love to add, on the side, if you want it to be a private ceremony, we would love to add circles to the ceremony tour. We want to have as many groups and communities of people consecrating this water that we're weaving with us. You can talk about the Susquehanna River and just be part of the team in that way, like Team Susquehanna. And I'm saving the best one for last, but be deeply involved in your own alchemy. And that might mean booking a session with Michael or I. Um, just being deeply involved with alchemy could just mean like learning more about like what sovereign means, and then shifting your inner posture to align with sovereignty. Or I don't know, I'm just using a word that we touched upon in this video. um yeah, Michael, you want to say anything about being deeply involved in your own alchemy?
Uh, being inspired. So one of the things which I have witnessed over these 10 years is people being inspired by what was done with the Susquehanna River and relationship with that, and understanding its esoteric history. And so being deeply involved in your own backyard and becoming more familiar with the waterways that make up the area you live, and beginning to understand and interact with the water in a deeper way, in that that is a way which one becomes more involved with their own alchemy.
And also the backyard waterways of your own mind, and being responsible for what goes on in there.
Mm-hmm.
And not only your mind, but your energy field, and the waterways of your energy field. So balance the shadow band with the light of sharing. Michael?
So yeah, there's just a lot of shadow banning has or the Susquehanna Alchemy videos on YouTube have been, shadow banned. It's just the nature of the world. And so this information doesn't really get out. These videos don't get out outside of the circle of people who are already watching them.
And how do you know this, Michael? Because you haven't had new subscribers?
Yeah, like you'll go, I get like updates from YouTube, and it'll say the last calendar month you've had, 50,000 views of 150,000 minutes or whatever that would be, and 0 new subscribers.
Right.
And what that means is, normally with numbers, like when people are watching something on YouTube, then YouTube refers those videos to other people they think would like it. Like that's the whole algorithm thing. And when you're shadow banned, like that doesn't happen. And so when you see when you see numbers that are legitimate, well then there's no new subscribers, that's the indication of a shadow ban. And in the past, I've never really cared anything about that. The numbers and the subscribers has never been anything that I've been interested in. But now that we're stepping into this River and Stars ceremony for the first time, like I'm interested in being able to reach new people. So yes, like the sharing of this information with people, this video with people, is a way to balance the shadow ban.
So someone reached out to you and actually gave you this language to understand why you're not getting new subscribers, even though you have the same amount of interest. And they gave you that language, shadow ban, which just means like they haven't put you on notice. No one's ever going to let you know, but they've changed the algorithm in reference to you. And so what you did see is when you were on higher side chats, that was a way of people coming and finding Susquehanna Alchemy on YouTube and subscribing. And you did get a bucket full of new subscribers from Higher Side Chats. Is that correct?
I got almost 2 bucketfuls, I believe.
Okay. So we know that acquiring new subscribers is possible, but it's going to require going outside of the YouTube algorithm to get to share that, to pass on the subscription of subscribing to the information of Susquehanna Alchemy, and the inspiration of Susquehanna Alchemy. So the more you can share outside of YouTube on Instagram, or God, I don't even know like what all the platforms are. That is a way that we can invite new people into the team / the community of this movement and work. All right, does that cover everything on this slide?
I think so. We've got one last slide.
And then, oops, not that way. So Susquehanna Alchemy's Michael's Loved by the Water. This is Michael's gal. That's Susquehanna's Alchemy. Susquehanna Alchemy's Loved by the Water is code for Michael's gal.
That's you.
That's me. I just wanted to like decode the title of this slide. So I have been interviewing Michael here, but we also do some co-interviewing discussion on a podcast called Loved by the Water. And that is something that I kind of hold together. There's coursework with the moon, and I've created a zine that is kind of the foundation of that coursework. So if you can imagine coursework with the moon that's based in a zine, it's kind of a fun, playful, at your own pace. And it does integrate a lot of what I have learned in practice with the Starboard and with Michael. And as Michael has referenced with my songs and my ceremonial leadership, Loved by the Water is also a body of songs. And then Loved by the Water is also just kind of a philosophy for me in how I carry sessions, and also can provide custom designed immersions and having an immersive experience wherever you'd like to. But I really think that having immersive experiences outdoors by the water is really transformative. And just a quick note that Loved by the Water is receiving love from the water, the element, but it's also the act of being loved alongside the water. And Loved by the Water is also a little bit of a play on probably primarily the podcast with Mike and Christy. Loved by the Water is kind of our romance story of our relationship, encapsulated in 4 little words. So more on that someday. And I think that'll be clear in the videos to come, describing how Rivers and Stars really came into fruition. So my Instagram is Loved by the Water, my Linktree and my Patreon, it's all Loved by the Water, as I'm loved by Susquehanna Alchemy's king himself.
Go and support Christy on Patreon and listen to her songs.
He loves the music, he loves the songs, don't you?
Yes, I do.
That's your favorite thing out of all of the stuff. That's sweet. Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, that's been me. And as I'm loved by the water, I'm very moved by the artistry of Susquehanna Alchemy. And it's been a pleasure to interview you and share these layers and levels of you with other folks. As I receive the information of your being, and I'm inspired by the essence of your being, and integrating with the challenges of your being your woman. Thank you for having me on Susquehanna Alchemy today.
Thank you for joining. This is by far the longest thing I've ever done on a computer.
Really?
I applaud you for your stamina, and all of this would not have happened without you. Specific the River and Stars ceremony. You're the master planner, so thank you for that, and thank you for that interview. That was a real surprise. I didn't know where that was going to go, and that was really it was special for me to have that done. So thank you.
My pleasure.
And everyone who joined us, thank you as well. I hope to see you out there in real life as we do this this Aero Circulation Mission 2024.
See you in ceremony. How long was it?